have an organization here in New Orleans called Fill the Needs. We're in New Orleans, Louisiana. I have been doing flood and disaster relief in this area since 2008. So we've been through our share of hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. And one thing that I find is that every single one of them follows almost the same pattern and formula in how needs kind of start to emerge. And Diana said earlier, everything is very dynamic. What people need today is not the same thing that people may need in 2 weeks when we can physically get things to them. So, all of these disasters follow the same pattern. And the first part is that initial triage, which we are in some cases, which is that rescue, that risk assessment, and identifying what's happening. I will say that this situation is like nothing I've ever seen before, because we're dealing with the standard issues that you have with a flood, plus we have compounded on that conflict and battle and severe dangers for the volunteers with organizations. After we kind of get past that rescue phase, then there's an acute response phase. And if we look at how the water comes, no matter what flood you're looking at, you have the communities that are first impacted, and then you have the communities that are impacted later. One of the challenges that we see is, even though the water has receded in one area, you can't always get there to respond, because you must go through another flooded area or danger zone in order to get there. So families and communities that are initially impacted have a longer time that they are without services and supplies and needs. And that's something to keep in mind. Water is always, in the first 3 days, water, 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 because we cannot survive without water. I have not seen environmental impact data yet from the area impacted by the dam, but one thing to keep in mind is that water is critical, and water is often contaminated. And regular standard filtering that we have available may help with, different bacteria and things like that, but it's not necessarily going to help remove chemical pollutants, which puts people at a long-term risk if they're drinking water that is from the impacted area. Diana, you had a question? I saw your hand go up.
So I didn't have a question so much as a couple of things that have come out. So we thought about filters. Filters are not useful in this situation because the filters may not filter asbestos. That's the first thing. So we rely specifically on water bottles. Bottled water. And there may be some towns that are a little bit further out that received a little bit of flood, but not a lot, that could use some water pumps from the ground. There will be other areas that have not been directly affected by the floods that will have their water supply cut because they were receiving from the reservoir. So these areas will need pumps. If you need pumps, please let me know. I have organizations working on this. And also about the impact, there is a future assessment of how this will impact on the long term done by the UN. I will share that on the links. Thank you.
Great. Here in New Orleans, we had Hurricane Katrina and ran into a situation. My home had 12 feet of water for 2 weeks. And then there was a receding of the water, and then another flood that probably brought in another 5 feet of water. With that, it brought in oil from the car that was in the tree, right? Because if you think all of this stuff is swept up, that is now contaminating the water system and the soil. So being aware that this problem with water may in some areas be a long-term challenge that they'll have to face, and identifying opportunities to address that, not just in the next month, but perhaps in the next year or longer. Same thing with soil. Areas that may be contaminated are not necessarily areas where we want to be growing things going forward. So as we're looking into food, that is something that we need to consider for long-term need in those communities. You know, that initial triage risk rescue phase can be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. Then we start getting into some acute response where we're taking care of people who are displaced, who have been evacuated, and who are unable to return home. And we have to think of their immediate needs in those first couple of weeks, but also, I don't know if we have any mental health teams on here, but I always say partner with a mental health team if you can find someone, because one of the challenges that you will see is as we go from the first phase to the second phase and people are getting stabilized in hostels and homes of other people, in centers, they're seeing that water recede and they want to go home and they want to see their home. But it's unsafe, and they may not have the supplies they need in order to get to their home. So after we get past those initial needs of food, water, shelter, we're looking at things like cleanup supplies, debris removal, shovels, depending upon how much water and how much debris has entered into these homes. Also, right now, as y'all are in the rescue phase, kind of like Diana said earlier, you can't see what's below you. And we run into this a lot throughout South Louisiana. Whenever the water is high, people are in boats, water starts to slowly recede, and where you were above cars and roof lines and easily maneuvering, now you are closer to debris that would normally be in the streets or on the roads, and you're hitting it, you're bumping into it, and it's creating a danger to maneuver. So one of the things that we started doing during Hurricane Ian just recently in Florida was partnering with organizations that had military capabilities from the standpoint of satellite imaging and 3D imaging technology, so that we could identify what the potential risks were in areas and where that debris may happen. Again, where you're working, it's far more complicated because of the mine situation. So as Diana said, safety, safety, safety. I tell people all the time, you know, if you're in an airplane and they give you the security video and they're telling you what happens when things go wrong, the first thing they say is put your mask on first, take care of yourself, because you then can't rescue and help other people if you are in an unsafe situation. And as much as it can be challenging and painful to know that we can't help, we also don't want to add to the problem or to create a bigger challenge where we are putting ourselves and our the people that we're helping at further risk. I know I'm talking a lot. I want to make sure that I am hitting some of the things that are important to y'all. I'm happy to tell you what the most common supplies are and when they're needed, but I want to make sure that I'm addressing things that make sense to what y'all need and what you're doing. Anyone?
Yes. Does anybody have a question, or does what Amy says make sense to you?
Yes, it does. If I may, I would like to say something as well. Another, I would like to point out a very important challenge of addressing the needs of vulnerable groups during these evacuations shouldn't be overlooked. And I'm talking in regards of elderly individuals, children, pregnant women, persons with disabilities, and other marginalized groups that often require specialized support and assistance during this evacuation process, and ensuring their inclusion and accessibility and safety as well during these evacuations demands and specific attention and appropriate measures. Moreover, I would like to point out as well what Amy said, the issue of public awareness and community cooperation, at least on both within the country in Ukraine, but specifically here internationally. Communicating the urgency of evacuations, providing clear instructions, countering misinformations can be certainly challenging during these times, especially during a conflict zone. And the efforts of engaging with local communities, leverage community leaders, and employing cultural sensitive communication strategies, I think that can significantly enhance the effectiveness of the evacuation efforts. One last thing that I would like to point out in regards of challenge is the post evacuation support and managing displacement of populations. Like Amy said, a lot of times when the water recedes, homeowners, it's just naturally that they want to go back to their houses. However, a lot of them, they don't, because of the other water damage or any other reason. So it is important to manage this displaced population must be addressed. Evacuated individuals often require immediate access to shelter, clean water, like Amy said, food, healthcare, and other essential services. And therefore, establishing and maintaining a well-coordinated effort in this time, it's as well as an adequate temporary shelter and provisions becomes vital to ensure the well-being of the displaced population after the flood itself.
Oh, I see now. Thank you so much for that, Carlos. I see Amy has written as well a list of brief summary of what she just mentioned. So she said immediate emergency relief is food, water, and shelter. For the week 1 would be water, pre-packed, shelf-stable food and baby formula. For week 2, diapers, adult diapers, and personal care items. For week 3, cleanup supplies like shovels and barrels that you can use to clean up. And things to consider would be the toxicity of the water on the floor, on the ground, mold, and other hidden dangers like as the water recedes, cars and other stuff, and electricity and water, like more water. Auntie, you have the word.
Actually, let Amy go first, and because she's going to fill in on whatever you were just saying, and I was summarizing some things that Carlos was saying. So,
okay, Amy.
So, yes, that's kind of when I get a phone call during a flood. Those are the things I'm being asked for, and one of the challenges is that we have to plan ahead because of transit times to get things. Other things to consider that are an issue during those first 3 weeks: gas and access to gas, because it's not like the gas station can easily refill in areas if roads are blocked, if there's limited transportation opportunities, or if there was a major damage of trucks. We saw that particularly during Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Ida, is that trucks were in the path And then those trucks were now taken off the road because they were damaged and could not bring gasoline into areas. Same thing with propane. One thing that we have been very successful with is totes of water and tanker trucks of water, and getting access to those where you can set them up in a community, not just for drinking water, but as people are returning home. If you consider the fact that, my house after Hurricane Katrina, I had 2 feet of mud in my house that we had to shovel out. Now, that mud, every person who touched that mud ended up with some kind of bacterial infection on their legs. Every single person. And that was partly because we didn't have running water for showers or to even rinse off after working. It would be, a few hours to get to the house and then work, and then a few hours to get out of the impacted area before we could shower. So those tanker trucks with cold water showers are highly recommended, especially if you're going to have volunteers going into those regions for long-term recovery, to make sure for the safety and long-term opportunity for your volunteers. And then just to address one thing when it comes to food, I don't know how it is where y'all are, but in Louisiana, food for us is healing. And people who don't know how they can help often want to cook food for people, right? That's how they feel that they can help evacuees or people who have gone through challenges. And hot food is not always the answer in those first 3 weeks because of all these safety concerns of sanitation, which is why we always say prepackaged, shelf-stable food. If you have people that want to focus on hot meals, what we often do is find a location that is about 3 hours outside of the disaster zone, set up a commercial kitchen space where we can prepare that food in bulk. And if we can get access to a freezer truck, that is ideal, because our teams will cook and bag in big commercial bags about 200 servings of, say, a soup or a rice dish, and we freeze it. That way, again, I'm dealing with South Louisiana where it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity, but we can transport that food in frozen. And we've done this in the Carolinas where we've actually flown it in from states away because we couldn't get food. But when those communities have access to clean water, they just boil in a bag that food. And by freezing it, it helps to manage transport weight because we're not adding ice to things to keep things at food safe level. And we can get that food into an impacted area, and any church or community center can take big pots of water, boil those bags, heat the food to food safe, and serve out of a pan without ever actually having to touch the food. And that is something that we start to roll out usually by week 3 or 4. So in those first few weeks, we have people sometimes, I know Diana said, 3 hours outside the zone, maybe she was recapping that. But even if you can't get it 3 hours outside the zone, maybe you have to go further to get to a safer area. By freezing it, if you can have access to freezing space, you minimize any safety concerns. Otherwise, highly recommend just going with prepackaged foods and MREs. And I know that gets, by week 3, we're tired of it, but it is sustaining us, and that the last thing you want to do is get volunteers, first responders, and evacuees sick because of food safety concerns. So, and I'm a chef in my day job, so I'm a little over passionate about food safety concerns.
Thank you so much for sharing this, Amy. So I do have a question. You keep talking about volunteers, and a lot of us here have crews that are in the ground providing assistance as we speak. Maybe if you could recap all the sort of recommendations you could have for these sort of crews, like how can we take better care of our volunteers, not necessarily referring to the war zone bed, but to specifically what to do on a flood zone for volunteers. Like, it would be very useful, I think.
Yes, I will say the first thing.
You're muted for some reason. I cannot hear you.
The first thing I would say is make sure that you are actively coordinating with government officials, right? Because safety is number one. For your volunteers, if you have volunteers on the ground, they probably are already building a network and already have kind of boots on the ground intel and knowledge. One thing that I notice is that if I have volunteers on the ground, they are the eyes and ears that filter up information. So yes, you have information that comes down from government, but oftentimes by the time we're getting that information, it can be a couple of days out of date. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is during this swift-paced response phase. So your volunteers on the ground, empowering them to share that data that they're acquiring, and then be that liaison between your volunteers and the government, so that you're also adding value and building that relationship. For your volunteers on the ground, if they have not done flood relief, you need to prepare them mentally for it. I know that they have been dealing with a war zone, but the smell is something that many of our volunteers will tell us it's something that they were not prepared for or expecting because of that mud, that wet, that organic matter, everything that was in the area. It's a smell that I can close my eyes and still smell it. So preparing them mentally that there's going to be a lot of stuff that could shock them. Making sure that they have their, first aid kits. Everyone has tetanus shots. I'm assuming these are all things that y'all are already doing, but one of the most common situations we see is the need for tetanus shots and people being injured because they step on a piece of metal, a nail that was exposed from a board that was on the ground that they didn't see. Lots of foot punctures because they're walking through maybe a few inches of water and can't see that debris under them. Also making sure that they have enough supplies. And I believe y'all are all doing this because of the zones that you're working in right now. But they have enough supplies to get them there and get them out. As far as gas, I joke oftentimes that I'm like a danger because I have gas cans in the back of the pickup truck and I have propane tanks and I have all these things, and it's probably not the safest solution. But if you have a staging area and you can get a gas tote set up for your volunteers, that will also help to manage that safety of transport back and forth, but allow them to fill up their boats and have access to supplies. I don't know if that's the direction you want me to go, Diana. There's so much stuff, and I know we have such a finite. I want to just hit the points that are most important to y'all.
Yeah, this has been incredibly useful. Actually, about tetanus shot, I don't think any of us have thought about this. So this is like, I'm going to put a call out for all the volunteers to get tetanus shots. When it comes to fuel, I know my organization in particular, because we are so organized and well set, we do have like refueling like tanks for fuel. So we actually have a hub in Dnipro. We have a hub in Kherson for volunteers where you can go and sort of get food and get water and get, fuel if you need. So it might be interesting if you wanted to get your crews in touch with us. I don't know what the process is, but just come to me and I will, figure out how to connect you with our hub. And if it's even possible, I think it is, but again, I have to confirm because we are also very aware of OPSEC. Again, we're in the zone where there's range missiles, and if we get SUSDAT, then they can bomb our humanitarian hub, and that's something that would be catastrophic for a lot of crews. So I'm quite, I'm very, careful with who gets the information of the location. When it comes to all of this that you're saying is new to all of us. I think none of us has had to deal with flood relief ever. And so I'm very grateful for your information. And other than that, I did have another question, but I forgot. Are there any other questions?
Me?
Yeah, yes, Auntie, please.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to do, Amy.
Sorry, Auntie,
Auntie, go ahead.
Before we ask, is this related to flood relief? Like
Yes.
just directly related? Thank you.
Well, in this situation, because one of the things that's different about what Amy is describing in Louisiana, I'm in Missouri, that is different in Ukraine. I'm a Return Peace Corps volunteer and have been volunteering and doing research for a year with the volunteers on the ground over there. So maybe I can translate some of it. That one of the things that's in operation is sort of a zone defense if you are a sports person. That what happens on the front, then the backup that happens after that. For example, Diana and Alex's organization with Help People, they're very much frontline. They only have 3 hours to drive to evacuate people. The problem is then it builds up back behind that with the evacuations as well. So there's no chain really yet. It's developing to get the flow back out of where it is in the hot zone. As far as wash and all of the things that you listed, those are the things that were in short supply before. Mm-hmm. So everyone is going to have continual challenges with that. When wells are ready to be re-drilled, it's going to be a long time before anyone can get a generator, access to power. Hand pumps, I know, are being manufactured and are available a lot cheaper. They may seem funny to people, but that's the way villages get their water, and that's going to be the first thing that's accessible to a lot of those places. So the timing of evacuations and how that happens in conjunction with the flood and what's available is going to be very complicated for people. And I think maybe outside of this group that's very much involved with the frontline work, there needs to be some support on the next level back in the zones to be able to take people further in and further where there are resources there to keep the front lines going. So those were the two things that came out for me as far as some of the translation between, floods. We have them here in Missouri too, and it happens in the same, not as bad as Louisiana, but that's kind of where those bridge. One last thing on remediation for soil and water when the time comes, because it's going to be a while before the soil and the water can be cleaned up. Fortunately for Ukraine, phytoremediation, using plants, using aquatic plants, and using land plants to clean the soil is an option. So as it's going to be a cheaper option than any of the other ones that are available for cleanup, they are so ridiculously expensive. So just timing wise, that's, out in the future, but also please keep that in mind for follow-up. So that's all I had.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Auntie. So I wanted to say when it comes to this is maybe one of the things that we are doing well right now, I would say, which is the supply chain until Kherson City is very well, like it's working well. By the way, I have partners that have access to generators. I have, I was concerned, I was thinking you may have left. You had a question, so you can ask this question after me. We have a partner that has generators that they can reallocate. We have a partner that can help with the pumps as well, and we have the humanitarian hubs in Kherson. Kherson right now, the administration said that they have enough food and enough water for now. I think UN also brought just 4 trucks of food. So for now, I would say at this point in time, we're lucky that we have, set up the supply chain all the way till Kherson City. It makes things a lot easier. It is indeed important. We're going to need as well water tanks. Our partners can also procure the big water tanks. So if we can, if any of you have any requests for water tanks, please reach out to me. We will see how we can, help. And now, Amy, you wanted to say something in response to Auntie D, and after this, you can speak.
She's spot on. And I think oftentimes for us, and I put it in the chat, our donors and the people who support our organizations get disaster fatigue. We went through one summer where we had 9 hurricanes, and it got to the point where it was no longer like, they were like, oh, it's just another hurricane, right? Because particularly I find with Americans, we have very short attention spans for disaster. And after the first 2 weeks, we have moved on to some other thing that we focus our heart and our concerns on, right? The next big thing that happens. And as difficult as it is to run an organization and respond to a disaster, we also have to keep in mind that this is our opportunity to get access while there's peak awareness to donors and while people care, because watching on TV people being rescued, hearing and seeing the water, these are things that kind of pull at the heartstrings. And when people move on, they're not thinking, kind of like Auntie D said, there's a long-term and a mid-term recovery process of people who may be displaced for forever. There are people who may be displaced for weeks. What is that? What does that look like for them, and what kind of resources can we provide? Because my organization focuses on the first 21 days, and then we support our partners that we've established, and we help to provide supplies and information for them for long-term recovery. But we have to be planning now for long-term recovery, because if we're not, then we're constantly chasing and not doing the greatest service that we could for others. So thumbs up to D for bringing all that.
I have something super important. So 2 things. Well, actually, I forgot the second thing. But the government right now is desperate to move people out from the zone. They are desperate. They told us they let us know this much. A lot of people are choosing to stay because, again, these are people that didn't leave when Russia took over. They didn't leave while it was being liberated. And now they think, they're so attached to this place. They thought we survived so much, we can survive here. But it's important to understand that this is not a possibility anymore. For at least a couple of years, they will not be able to return safely to the zones. And if they do, they're going to face a lot of medical difficulties. And I forgot what the other thing was I wanted to say, but this is a great time. Does anybody have any questions at the moment? Any burning questions, any things that they want to add to what has been said? Yes, Lubimaya. I think you're muted.
Okay. So the question is connected to the first one because there were two cases when people asked for help, not even on the left side, but on the right side. But because of the lack of coordination and this problem, I think it's not only in that situation, but it's shows the main, like people were asking for help, but because of they're not connected to military and those independent volunteers who could go there, they were like afraid that could be the threat. So people were left on their own, and one of the case it was successful. They rescued themselves, so people just rescued people. But it's one of the successful cases. But there are many cases that are not solved, and they cannot be solved because there is no this connection. Those people who need help and those who like can help.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for this. So I agree. If you want, you can refer them all to Help People to our organization. Anyone can request free evacuation. I'm going to add as well our website, which is helppeople.org.ua, and they can see all our social media. We're very legit. We have all our hotline for evacuations there, and they can contact. So if they don't trust you, because I've had this problem in other areas as well, if they don't, I'm not sure that this is real, you can forward them towards our website, and we will sort it out. This is it. That's our Facebook. This is our website. One thing I wanted to say is that for volunteers, we do have several ways that we're coordinating. Firstly, there is a Signal group, which I'm going to share just here for those who are not but are helping. I'm gonna fetch the link in a minute. Hold on. This is only for those who are connected here. We don't want any infiltrations, which is why it is not made public. Whoever you think should belong in this group, please redirect them to me. We also have Marina. Marina is leading a humanitarian hub in Kherson, and she coordinates the requests. So if someone sends a request for evacuation or food or volunteers, whatever you need, you can reach out to her. Auntie, do you mind fetching Marina's number and adding it here?
Oh, yeah, just a second.
Yeah, thank you. And then also to say, yes, we do have the volunteers hub. So we have Help People has a volunteers hub where volunteers can go and get food, water, and the fuel. And we also can give accommodation for volunteers. As of now, the government is requesting that those who are not in the registered organizations, like a list, that they don't go, because again, it's too dangerous. I know that this is not going to work. We were considering with the local administration to put in place a lockdown. I think they decided against it yesterday because of the limitation that it would put on the evacuations efforts, at least on the side on the free side. So we are at the moment, again, it's all a lot of information flowing and everybody's overwhelmed, but we do have networks that over time are going to become even more established, and these networks, you can use them, they are yours. And if you think, again, other organizations should join or have questions, they can also go to my Facebook group, a humanitarian coordination for Ukraine, and they can ask questions there in English or Ukrainian, it doesn't matter, because we are a lot of the people that are, like, we have several networks that are interconnected. And if they put a question in my Facebook group, and if no one else answers it, I will answer it. And we are kind of like troubleshooting, so we make sure that your query gets answered. If I don't have it or don't know it, someone else in the network will. So let me fetch that as well. Another link, that is this one. So the group is called Humanitarian Coordination for Ukraine. Hold on. Does that answer the question, Maya?
And I want to add, what Diana and team are doing and what everyone on this call is doing right now is critical, because if it's the networks that of trusted organizations who start to build relationships and work together that get things done. And I like to think that a whole bunch of teeny tiny little organizations all focused on the same cause, communicating and working together and leveraging each other's resources can make bigger impacts than one big large organization that has to jump through more hoops and has a little bit more bureaucracy. So knowing that having these trusted networks that you've already established in the communities, but then building on them and leveraging them, the more you do that, as resources become available, someone has access to water, someone has access to shower trucks, I have access to volunteers, I have access to boats, whatever it is. When you can bring those together and work together in partnership, you can have a greater impact than if you were just, a rogue do-gooder on your own, right? Which is what I used to call our organization before we had a network, was that we were rogue do-gooders. We went out there, we tried to save the world, but we realized you can't do it alone. You have to do it with a team. And building that team and having someone who, like Diana and other organizations, to just keep filtering that information with the Signal groups and Facebook groups. I mean, where we are now compared to our relief efforts, back during Katrina and the floods in Iowa in 2008, technology, if we leverage it the right way, can do a lot of good in these situations.
Yeah, thank you, Amy, for saying that, and I wanna emphasize that. I know it's very difficult on the ground right now. We are supporting local organizations. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. When I started volunteering was the same. I was just a normal citizen, and there was something, and someone needed to do something, and that someone was me. I took off, I did, and over time I started to build a network. The first time I did this, was in 2015. And over these last 18 years, I built a network of activists like Amy, like others that are here, where I realized that, I have skills to help people cope with this, but my focus is on supporting local grassroots and small charities, because we are the most impactful people. We do miracles with little money. So for me, that was and as well, we are really a lot of the times, like in the case of Amy, a lot of these organizations are actually also affected. So they are the most effective ones. They're also the ones that understand the problem the better. And they are usually often the ones that require the most. So what over years we have done is that we realized that these people needed more support. And so we set up our organizations, charities, grassroots, volunteers internationally from America, from Europe. And what we do is we support these local organizations and local local communities with resources from abroad. So now Amy was talking about her partners as well. My partners are also, a lot of them, Americans. This is how I supported Help People. I was active from the first day last year. And when I realized that my international teams were doing more than they were supposed to be able to take on, I realized that a local organization may be helping them. And I wanted to map who that organization is, and that was Help People. And that's how I ended up volunteering with them until now. And we have managed to help procure for them the coordination with the government, the coordination with the military, the permits, all the resources, donations that they needed as well. So if your organization has any need at all, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to my networks that I have posted, and we will do our best to help you get what you need. Because for us, it is important that. For me, it's important that you know that you're not alone, that we are here supporting you. And I think that the The blessing that we have right now is that we are building on the knowledge of all of these other networks that, have dealt with disaster before, with Amy and my network from Humanitarian Coordination for UK. So if you have any requests at all, whatever it is, no matter how weird it is, just come to us because we will try and support you. Are there any other questions or any other comments?
If I may, I would like to mention the in regards of another hazard, like in this case, the combination of flood waters and the displaced landmines, which creates a hazardous and unpredictable environment, particularly when the communities are attempting to evacuate swiftly and seek safety as well. So in order to address this challenge, I think it's important to remember that it's crucial to incorporate mine action and explosive ordnance disposal expertise into the evacuation plans, especially in this case, because, for example, the element of landmines or ordnance explosive is not present in most floods. For example, in Louisiana or Missouri, or in Colombia. However, in this case, landmines are a factor that definitely hinders the evacuation. And I think that conducting a thorough assessment of the affected areas and prioritizing the identification and marking of minefields is essential step for mitigating these risks. I think it's important a close collaboration with the relevant authorities and including mine action organizations, which can facilitate this coordination of safety evacuation. I think it should be implemented of appropriate measures to protect the evacuees itself.
Yes, I want to put an emphasis on that. We had 2 volunteers falling victims of mines in the water when extracting people last week. One of them lost a limb. The other one, I'm not even sure that survived. Russia has also put water mines in the water, small, medium, they're like a little canister in the water that floats midway, and whoever trips on it activates it. But that's just gossip. What we know for sure is that the landmines are displacing. And so I don't know exactly how that looks like right now, but Carlos, do you have any information that you can tell us now very briefly about mines that are displaced because of flood and how that may look like? Otherwise, you and I can reach out later and you can help me find some resources to add to a training.
Certainly. So as we know, the presence of landmines and these unexploded ordnance in flood-affected areas adds an additional layer of complexity. So far, what I have known, the types of mines and booby traps as well, because they're not always landmines as the device itself. Models ranging from tank landmines that have become dislodged, from butterfly landmines, toe poppers, or to the point of man-made booby traps, like Diana mentioned, that while it has not been verified, the use of this during the flood, it has been recorded the use of booby traps by Russian forces, which, these booby traps don't discriminate whether it's an innocent victim or if it's a Ukrainian soldier. I would say that so far, those are the types of mines that have been found and that have been dislodged. One of the most, I would argue, in my assessments, anti-tank landmines don't have the same risk for the evacuees or the volunteers, the same as butterflies, because these devices detonate due to change of pressures. So they can be moved. I mean, they don't explode when moving